Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadare Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dhanyavad Pranam devotees. So I received some questions. I still have some to catch up to, so I'm asking for some patience. This question was regarding a devotee who wrote asking what is the difference. Essentially, actually, the devotee was saying in the question that the mode of goodness, Sattva Gun, when it becomes completely pure, is it that it becomes Suddha Sattva, like in the verse Suddha Sattva Viseshatma, etc. So is the material mode of goodness, when it's completely purified, is that called Suddha Sattva? So that was the gist of the question, and the answer to that very quickly is no. So the mode of material goodness does not become Suddha Sattva. Suddha Sattva refers to the internal energy. So the material mode of goodness is part of the material energy. So the mode of ignorance, tamas, rajas, passion, and sattva goodness are still within the paradigm of the material energy. So it is not that that particular mode of goodness becomes, as you mentioned, completely pure and turns into Suddha Sattva. Suddha Sattva is the very nature of the spiritual energy, composed of Aladini Shakti, Samvit Shakti, and Sandini Shakti, or Swarup Shakti it's called. And that Suddha Sattva, that pure transcendental energy, is also a revelatory power. Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Tarishyat Idyate Tatra Pumam Apavrita. So that Suddha Sattva is the very energy that reveals Bhagavan. So the material mode of goodness is, according to Bhagavad Gita, I'll read the verse, Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat Prakasham Aman, let me enlarge this, Anamayam Shukushongena Bhadnati Jnanashongena Cha Agaha. So here it's mentioned that the nature of the mode of goodness, though it is purer than the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance, and in the material mode of goodness, some illumination can take place. That's why in the beginning of our practice of bhakti, before it is completely pure, then a mixture of the modes of nature are still present. So there is an analysis that while one is practicing bhakti before it becomes completely pure, then those 9 types of bhakti, such as hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., those 9 processes combine with the mutations of the modes of material nature, because the modes of material nature are never steady. So it's not that one can exist exclusively in Sattva Gun, or exclusively in Rajagun or Tamagun. So what happens is that there's always an interplay between these 3 modes of material nature. And because there are 3 modes of material nature and they interact with each other, you would have a situation where you have 3 modes of material nature times interaction with each other would create 3 times 3 is 9. So then if you combine that with the 9 types of devotional service, 9 times 9 is 81. So you end up with 81 different nuances in the practice, as long as the jiva is not reached nishta or reached some level where the modes of nature have subsided. 81 different varieties of presentation in the practice. So here it means influence. It does not mean, because bhakti is a prabhav, means an influence of Swarup Shakti. So the modes of nature cannot overtake the bhakti practice and make it 81 different varieties. The influence of the modes still being present in the jiva as they unfold manifest this combination of 81 different varieties. So some people you'll find in their practice of bhakti may have tendencies more in the mode of passion. Some may even still be more in the mode of ignorance. And predominantly you'll find that those who are practicing bhakti, sudden bhakti, rising early in the morning, etc., their lifestyle is dominated by the material mode of Sattva gun, or material mode of goodness. But that material mode of goodness, while it is, it can be illuminating, meaning it can provide the mental condition under which doing spiritual practice is conducive. It also has some, I'm sorry for putting my hands in front of my face, it has some also negative tendencies. Sukha sangena bhadati. So it has the tendency to condition one to personal happiness or self-interest. And jnana sangena cha agaha. So this is interpreted differently, right? So anagaha means sins, right? Or anagaha means, agaha means sins, and anagaha means a person who's sinless. So he's addressing Arjuna as, oh, sinless one. But it says that the material mode of goodness has two qualities. One is it conditions one to personal happiness, and also can give a false sense of knowledge, right? So the false sense of knowledge is that my personal happiness of feeling very good and very sattvic and very peaceful, this is the primary objective of my sadhan bhajan or my spiritual practice. And when that arises, it detracts and takes away the very nature of what pure bhakti is. So this is not what is it? I'm not advocating for life to be in turmoil for it to be pure bhakti. I'm not at all advocating that. I'm only saying that the mode of goodness has these qualities, that it conditions one to personal happiness and gives a false sense of knowledge. So the very nature of pure bhakti is anya abhilasito sunya, that there should be no other desire. Anukulyena Krishna anusilanam. All silanam means endeavors. Sildatu means to do things, right? But all things should be done anukulyena Krishna anusilanam. They should follow the mode of wanting only for the anukul happiness and pleasure of Sri Krishna. And of course, Jiva Goswami Prabhupada has mentioned Krishna never means Krishna alone, means Krishna, Krishna's associates, headed by Srimati Radhika, Krishna's Dham, everything, right? So all endeavors should be only for their pleasure, which means Atmasukha duke gopio nakareli vichar. Just like the gopis, they have no self-interest. They have no personal desire. All of their endeavors are only for Krishna's happiness. So in the same way, pure bhakti, which is Suddha Sattva, has this transcendental quality. There is no self-interest. So just in this verse alone, the statement that it conditions one to personal happiness for yourself is an indication it can't be equated with Suddha Sattva, which is part of the spiritual energy, which gives rise only to the desire for the pleasure of Sri Krishna. Right? So Suddha Sattva and the mode of material goodness, Sattva gun, are not the same. Also in the ninth, I believe it's the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. No, maybe ninth canto, I have to remember. But it's mentioned there, Sattvam Chamisram Na Cha Kalavikramaha. That the mode of material goodness, what to speak of passion and ignorance, are not at all present in the spiritual realm. And Na Cha Kalavikramaha, nor is material time. So material time means that which we experience here is past, present, and future. It's called Prakat Kal. And this Prakat Kal, past, present, and future, it has no influence in the spiritual world. So Al Srila Prabhupada used to use the saying that time is conspicuous by its absence. Because in the spiritual world, the question could be raised, but Mukunda, don't they experience daytime, nighttime, etc.? Even if you look at the Ashtakaliya Lila, then it's throughout the 24 hours of the day, broken up into roughly 3-hour periods, right? So time in the spiritual world is an udipan for serving. it is not an influence because it has no ability to make the bodies of the spiritual inhabitants to grow older, etc., etc. Also, it has very unique features in the service to the mood, time does, in service to the mood of the individual devotees. I'm giving one example. When Mother Yashoda came to Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse, and she saw Krishna after 80 or 90 years of separation, at that time, due to the upsurge of her Vatsalya Prem, at that time, Krishna came to her and took her breast milk. So at this point, Krishna would have to be close to 100 years old, because of 80 and 90 years of separation had already passed. He would have to be, well, around 90 years old, because he left at around 10 years and some months, right? And now 80 to 90 years had passed before they met again in Kurukshetra. So certainly Shri Krishna would have been of an age where the idea of taking breast milk would be, by material calculation, ridiculous. So how could this be possible? Because Mother Yashoda, she has the ability, based on her Vatsalya Prem, to eternally see Krishna in his Bal Roop, means his form as a small boy. And Krishna, in reciprocation with that Prem, takes that form from Mother Yashoda. You understand? So time is only a servant of the bhav of the residents of the spiritual world. It has no independent influence like it does in the material world, where the independent influence of time takes its action on the jivas and causes their gradual aging and eventually gradual demise. So that's not the influence of time in the spiritual world. So in the same way, the mode of Suddha Sattva, right, back to our original point, is not at all to be equated with the material mode of goodness. And the material mode of goodness can never be completely pure, because it will always have some interplay with the modes of passion and ignorance in the cycle of these three modes. Okay, so that was the answer to Prabhuji's question. I'm trying to think. There was another question that came in I thought I may be able to answer this morning, but I think maybe I'll wait on that because it was a little more complicated. It was a question regarding the nature of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statements in the first chapter of Jaiva Dharma, and it dealt with the idea of the fact that he mentions that the jivas undergo nisarga. And so the question that was asked was whether or not, according to the Paramatma Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami Pad, there are mentions about navikari, that the soul doesn't undergo vikara. Vikara means undergoes transformation. So just in short, and I'll answer it more elaborately at another time, but Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description here of nisarga is a perception by condition. In other words, he even gives the example that water is the vastu. He gives a whole explanation of what is vastu and what is vastava vastu and avastava vastu, right? So it's a pretty more complicated answer. That's why I was going to do it a different day. But essentially, vastava vastu means something that is a truly abiding substance. It means something that is not subject to change in its essential nature. Avastava vastu means something which is temporal, which really doesn't have an intrinsic nature which stays. So it is really not real. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita verse, Na shato vijite bhavo, na bhavo vijite shataha, uboy api dristonyas, tuanyos tattvadarshibhi. That seers of the truth have looked at things and saw. Those things which have eternally abiding nature, they are real. And those things which have no permanent existence, they are not real. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur essentially is describing the same phenomenon. So when he comes to the point of describing, however, the transition of the jivas in their conditioned state, he describes it as nisarga. But he describes that nisarga is a condition. It is not that the actual atma has changed, right? Because the atma is navikari, right? And even in Bhagavad Gita stated that the atma does not change, right? So it's not that the atma has changed. Conditions that the Atma is in relation to, because Nisarga means also a condition that is caused by relation to something. So by the relation of the Atma from time without any beginning, Anadikal, with the material energy, Nisarga takes place. A false identification with the material element that causes a transformation in the consciousness or chitta of the jiva that makes them think I'm a byproduct of the material energy as a gross and subtle body. You understand? So here, Nisarga does not mean vikar. It's not the same. The Atma actually does not change, but only the condition arises where the perception coming from the Atma is that it is under a condition that's not its original nature. And to understand it's not my original nature requires the process of some kind of spiritual unfoldment to become disentangled from that conception. Because I've explained before, avidya has 5 features, and one of those features is called abhinivesh. And abhinivesh means a absorption of the jiva in relation to the material energy, which makes the personal efforts of the jiva to extricate themselves impossible. So in the 11th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, I think it's 22:10, it mentions that, right? Anadya vidya yukta sha purusha shaviratmanam svato sambhavanti anya gyanatva ganado bhavet. That the jiva, having been inextricably connected to material energy, swato now, on their own, they cannot extricate themselves. So, anya, it requires another. That person must be gyanatva ganado bhavet. So 2 qualities are mentioned here. One is gyanatva, means realized soul, who's realized beyond the material energy. And ganada indicates compassion, mercy, etc. Because the word da here means they are inclined to give you the knowledge to help extricate you from material energy. So here it implies compassion, etc., etc. Right? So this means guru sadhu. Right? So Nisarga is not the same thing as vikar. So Jiva Goswami and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur are on the same page regarding this. If you look at the Tika of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur on the very first verse of Shishashtakam, he mentions both Jiva Goswami and Baladev Vijabhushan as having given very expert commentary on the nature of Jiva Tattva. So he says right there in that, I don't have the shloka in front of me, but he mentions, yes, that the mention of Jiva Tattva has already been nicely concluded by both Jiva Goswami and Baladev Vijabhushan in his Govinda Bhashya Tika, right, which is his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, right? So we shouldn't confuse those 2 things. So he gives the example that when water under Nisarga, that means under a certain condition, in which in this case would be the condition of a temperature where freezing could take place, that water appears to become ice. But actually the nature of water has not disappeared, right? So it hasn't transformed. The water has not become ice, because then we'd have to say that the water no longer existed. It became ice. And now ice is existing. But ice is a nisarga. It is a temporal condition that has arisen due to the temperature drop. But as soon as the natural temperature again emerges, the water again will manifest itself. So, of these questions were being asked by Sannyasi Thakur to Premdas Babaji in Jaiva Dharma, and essentially he was trying to understand what is the nature of Dharma, right? Because the entire book is called Jaiva Dharma, right? What is the Dharma of the Jiva? So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has utilized this to describe the essential Dharma of the Jiva. And of course, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's mentioned there, Jivera Supoya Krishnera Nityadas, that the dasitva of the jiva is their actual nature. And being the actual nature, the dharma related to that is the actual dharma of the jiva. It is the jaiva dharma, it's the actual dharma of the jiva. Right? Similarly, Srila Jiva Goswami Pada in Paramatma Sandarbha, when he enumerates the 21 qualities of the jiva, he mentions Paramatmaika Seshitva Subhav. So the word Seshitva is a synonym for dasitva, you can say. So he's indicating the same thing. The swabhav, nature of the Atma, is that is Paramamaika Seshitva. Right? So there's other indications of Seshitva too. Sesh means like the remainder in Sanskrit. And in this case, it refers to the remaining energy of Paramatma. Because the jivas themselves, their existence has manifested from the last element of energy in the category of jiva from Paramatma. Right? So you have to research these things, right, and see. Right? Because Karanodakshay Vishnu, Gavadakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, or Paramatma, Antaryami, they are one person and they're manifest in three different functional situations. Right? So Paramatma Seshita means the jivas are the jiva shakti coming from Antaryami or Paramatma. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has mentioned that the jivas in the spiritual world, for instance in Golok Vrindavan, they are manifest from Sri Baladev Tattva. Of course they're eternal, so manifest here doesn't mean a historical time in which they manifested. It means their existence is directly related to Sri Baladev. Now sometimes people question this particular aspect of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur because of the idea of manifest. But Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, just like Jiva Goswami Pad has done, is speaking on an ontological expression. Because we know the jiva is eternal, so they don't manifest at a particular time. But in Jaiva Dhamma 15th chapter, in fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, while speaking on Jiva Tattva, speaks to the inability of Prakat Bhasha, means material language, to really fully convey spiritual concepts. Because the spiritual dimension is one thing, which actually comes more as an actual realization or spiritual epiphany within the chitta of the jiva when it becomes purified. So all of our language is simply an attempt to give an indication of that thing which is truly meant to be an experiential reality by realization. You understand? So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur similarly has given ontological, just like Jiva Goswami in Paramatma Sandarbhan, Anuched 19, etc. He's describing Jiva Tattva, and he's giving an ontological description of the Atma. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is similarly giving ontology more here than some actual historical or other kinds of consideration. Right? So we need to be able to understand that as well. When reading our acharyas, we need to be able to understand their mode of expression. And that will only come by hearing under the guidance of Sri Guru and qualified Vaishnavas. Right? And especially when it comes to any rasa vichar, means considerations of rasa, like even study of Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore Rupa Goswami Pad is mentioned, Srimad Bhagavatam Artadam Rasiko Saha. We should study under the guidance of Rasik Bhavuk Vaishnavas. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is Rasa Sastra. Right? It is meant to give the understanding of the highest form of rasa. Right? I made one whole presentation because of a question on what's to be gleaned from Srimad Bhagavatam. Similarly, on the Sunday Zoom class that we had just last week, we also went over what is the actual presentation of Srimad Bhagavatam. What was Vyasadev's intention here? Because Vyasadeva had already separated the one Veda into four. He had compiled all of the Puranas, right? Itihas like Mahabharata, right? And also all Upanishads. Everything had been done already, right? So only after his conversation with Sri Narada Muni, after his Narad Samvad, and he did Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pratile Amale, after he did deep monastic meditation, means like Rag Marg path, he realized the nature of what is the conclusion of all of Vedic Shastra, all of Puran, all of Itihas, right? And therefore he wrote Srimad Bhagavatam. And that Srimad Bhagavatam has been described. After one reads this Bhagavatam, what does it need to read any other Shastra? Because they, what is this? Artam Brahmasutranam Bhat Atya Vinenoya Gayatri Vasa Rupo So Vedata Paribrimrita. That Vedanta Sutra is all explained in Bhagavatam. All Itihas, Mahabharata is also explained in Bhagavatam. The very Vedamata Gayatri, right? And the perfection of that, or the maturation of that Gayatri, which is Kam Gayatri, also explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Also, all of the Vedas, right? Veda Paribramita, their definitions are given in Srimad Bhagavatam. So everything is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. And the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam is Radha Dasyam, to put it simply, right? So we have to be able to see the conception that's coming from our acharyas, and under guidance, hearing them, then it creates the epiphany in the heart, the manifestation in the heart, and it becomes a realization like this. You understand? And then that realization becomes an actualization of what you realized. You understand? So they kind of like building blocks like this. So anyways, I've kind of gone way beyond the subject matter that the question was there. And I will do a separate, more in-depth description of Jaiva Dharma. I'm doing only from memory here. But I'll go back and research everything, Prabhuji, as far as that question is concerned regarding the difference between Jiva Goswami's presentation and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, which I've already mentioned. There is no difference, right? You have to look at it carefully, right? And we'll deal with that. All right, my Dandavat Pranam. Vancha Kalpatrubhishcha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Vancha Kalpatrubhishcha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.